Candy Crush. Take a trip through history of chocolate. Chocoholics have existed for centuries. In 17th century London, 2,000 chocolate houses were gathering spots for the wealthy and for opponents of King Charles II who tried to shut them down. Chocolate drinks were so popular that demands for cacao and sugar expanded the slave trade. In Chocolate, the exhibition at the Museum of Science, this bit of fact is part of the fascinating story behind a food that sweetens our lives. Chocolate is so ubiquitous today that it's surprising to learn that it was largely available only as a drink until the 1840s, when a British company made the first chocolate bar and sparked a surge in handmade chocolates. But the greatest debt is owed to the Mayans, who 3,000 years ago discovered how to turn the cacao seed into a spicy drink, and the slaves who worked the 17th and 18th century cacao plantations. Part of the fun and interest of this exhibit, developed by Chicago's Field Museum, is the way it approaches chocolate from so many perspectives, from an environmental and production standpoint. It focuses on the cacao plant as part of the rainforest ecology, the processing of its seeds, and the West African farmers who produce most of the world's cacao beans today. In the context of history, culture, and economics, the exhibit portrays cacao's role in Mayan and Aztec cultures, its expansion into Europe after Spain conquered the Aztecs, its native Central Americans and African slaves who toiled on plantations, and the mass production of chocolate and its consumption spread around the world. All this information is made compelling by the abundance of high-quality graphics and visuals, a life-size cacao tree and seed pods, replicas of Mayan and Aztec drinking and ceremonial vessels, examples of European serving china, 19th century candy molds, vintage 20th century cocoa tins, photographs and paintings, and of course, piles of luscious-looking chocolates. The strength of the exhibit is the way it engages. By pressing a highlighted area on a cacao tree, visitors learn about the roles of birds, monkeys, insects, and the rainforest canopy in the survival of the trees. A film brings viewers into a 21st century Ghana village where members raise, harvest, and sell cacao and work with nonprofits to achieve an income and protect the rainforest. At another station, visitors get the chance to be virtual chocolate makers, starting with the roasting of the seeds and ending with the tempering and molding of the chocolate. They can test their knowledge of the chocolate trade and consumption. They learn, for example, that Ivory Coast produces nearly half the world's cacao beans, 40 million people are employed worldwide by the chocolate industry, and the Swiss consume the most chocolate of any country. Explaining how chocolate became available to the masses starting in the 19th century, the exhibit points to several major figures. It became affordable after Henri Nestle co-developed milk chocolate, which allowed chocolate makers to use less of the relatively expensive cacao. And a Dutch chemist developed processes to make a less bitter chocolate and to remove the cocoa butter to create a powder used for hot cocoa and baking. If there's a weakness in the exhibit, it's a failure to explore what distinguishes one brand of chocolate from another, or to give attention to the burgeoning number of artisanal chocolate makers. Nor does it look into the science of why people crave chocolate, except to say that it contains a chemical called phenylethylamine, which is known to spike in people when they fall in love. Don't be surprised if you leave the exhibit in search of chocolate to pop in your mouth.